Welcome, everyone, to the Ad. Podcast. This time I have a very interesting guest and an old friend, Paul Rayner, with me. Paul is the founder of Virtual Genius, which is a consulting and training company. He's also the founder of Explore DDD conference, which is held in the United States in Denver. And Paul and I go way back, I guess, 15 years maybe. I'm calculating quickly. It seems like we had
at least.
So,
when you were living in Denver, that's when we first connected. Yeah.
Right. So, Paul, say what you'd like about yourself. You know, the genius part of the virtual genius.
Well, I always joke about that. I actually first incorporated that company in Australia in 95, I think it was. And it was always meant to be a bit of a joke that, you know, there's real genius and then there's virtual genius. And it started out as a web design company because it was the mid 90s and that's what everyone was doing. But then when I incorporated it here in Denver almost 20 years ago, it originally started out as a side gig. And then around 2009, I went full-time as a consultant and really have built that around domain-driven design primarily since then. And it's just been a lot of fun to be a consultant and be able to come into companies and different contexts and learn quickly and help people, hopefully help people with better situations. So, yeah, I live in Colorado, where you used to be until you defected to the southern states.
Yeah, there's a story behind that too. I don't know if they ever told you, but well, and you know, so just to, I think let's walk the timeline a little bit. It was, I don't even remember what you just said about one of your earliest ISA, the International
Association of Software Architects, which is still going from what I understand. Yeah.
So you go ahead.
Yeah, I got started. What happened with that, I'll just tell it from my perspective, I guess, is I was working as a software architect at a company and I really just didn't know any other software architects. This was the time when alt.net was really kind of ascendant and there was just a lot of buzz around behavior-driven development and test-driven design, test-driven development and domain-driven design and things like that. And I didn't really feel like I had anyone I could talk to about these kinds of things. And then I found the ISA website and I remember we reached out to the organization and ended up starting a chapter in Denver in the tech center. And my good friend, Tim Berglund, who, we've been friends for a long time. He came on as kind of like both of us running it together with some help from other people and just started trying to run regular meetings, I think every month down in the tech center to provide something for people that were actually designing systems, right? And that cared about things like software design. There really wasn't anything at the time like that. It seemed like every meetup or user group was mostly focused on tools and frameworks rather than design and modeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Kevin Jemenick was working, as I recall, up in the Boulder area. I don't even recall exactly how I met Kevin, but I think it was Kevin who told me about ISA and suggested that I join. So I did that somewhere along the way. I don't know if it was 2008, 2009, somewhere in that time frame.
Somewhere in that time frame. Yeah. And Kevin was really instrumental in getting that off the ground too. And just, really good at connecting people and contributing to that. So that was a good season because we were able to, connect a lot of people. And, that's, I think, how you and I met because you came and spoke at the monthly meeting and, just really brought a lot of expertise in terms of domain-driven design and kind of connected that way, I guess.
Yeah. In fact, as I recall, the first talk that I gave about DDD was, I think, a kind of tag team thing. You somehow or another during the meeting, we both learned that we were using DDD, and one of us said, "Why don't we co-present?" And I recall you said, I want to talk about the strategic patterns. And I said, okay, I'll take the tactical patterns. And,
Sure.
And I don't know if we actually spoke on the same night. I think maybe we did, or maybe you took the first part on one month and I took another. But I do remember that fairly well, that it happened. And so that was sort of, the beginning of mutual interest in, or at least knowledge of mutual interest in DDD. Then I recall that you told me, I'm going to go out to somewhere in the East Coast, I think, to Eric's DDD immersion workshop. I think it was at the time, and you did, and you came back and you told me, I'm going to get Eric to come to Denver and for something, right? He was going to come to Denver, and what it ended up being was he taught DDD immersion.
That's right.
In Denver. He invited me to attend, and you actually did some teaching as a. That was your kickoff.
That was my trial by fire.
Yeah,
I still feel bad you had to experience that.
No, I thought it was good, and what was good is the times that Eric wasn't directly teaching, he was there to ask questions and clarify and. So no, it worked out very, very well. I would not have wanted to be in your position, frankly.
Right.
I've given talks with Eric in the room, and that's never easy for me anyway.
Yeah. I look back. That was really a challenging process, because what Eric wanted to do was to ensure that anybody that taught his material, taught the immersion class, was really capable of doing it justice, and so. That whole process involved me attending the class, and then that summer I taught half the material in New York with Eric, and at the end of every day he would give me feedback on how my section went, which was awesome. And then in I think it was just before Black Friday that November, the one you came to in Denver down in Lone Tree, it was the same process. I taught the other half of the curriculum with feedback from Eric, and that was with some prep work prior to the workshop of teaching the material to Eric over these types of video calls and getting feedback, live feedback on that as well. So it was rigorous would be an understatement, but it was funny because right after that Thanksgiving, I went and taught the full class at a client, and I was very confident that I could do it.
I remember who that client is. Wasn't it Coles? It was Coles, and I think you got some consulting after that. But they had experienced some really bad, outages and stuff on previous Black Fridays, right? And
they've had a lot of challenges with that. I think anytime you have somebody that, especially a retailer or any retailer that is first going into like e-commerce scale kind of transactions and the complexities of distributed systems and all of that, you're going to expect some challenges. And like a lot of companies, they butted up against that for sure. And it was just a real joy. I really enjoyed my time learning their systems and training and coaching with them. So that was really my first experience of going in and doing that type of work. And it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Getting on an airplane to go to a client, that's always cool, right? When you're mainly working around town, it's like, hey, wow, this is neat, So.
And especially for me, because I was just really starting out with some of that. And so being able to have that level of trust to be able to go in and do that. And I just love you build the relationships with people at the client and see the impact you can make. So it was a good experience.
Yeah.
Go from there.
So now fast forward a little bit. We co-founded DDD Denver. I think it was like May of 2011. We started it, and it was a nice opportunity to kind of get things going on something different, something interesting. And we had a really good show up. I think we may have had 20 or 30 people show up for the very first one. There was Dave Muirhead, who had been using DDD for some work, and he was there. I think so. Actually, Randy Stafford showed up, I think, at one of the ISA meetings,
right.
and that actually Randy showed up, and I had maybe exchanged emails with Randy or something, but I had never met him personally, and I had some reason to kind of be nervous about him being there. And I remember I gave a patterns talk, and I presented some patterns that I myself developed. And I recall Randy at the end of the talk going, okay, so how many uses of that pattern, or one of the whatever, all of the patterns, have you seen, right? And I was like, what's he getting at? And so I literally I didn't know what he was driving at. So
what is the question?
So I literally counted in my head, and thankfully I came up with the number 3 or 4, and because of real uses of them. And I found out later why he asked is because of Ward Cunningham's C3.com, the wiki, and there was a wiki page out there called the Rule of 3, which stipulated that if you did not have at least 3 references to a pattern, it was not a pattern. Now I know that since then, I think the rule of 3 has kind of changed or been diminished. Rebecca Werfsbrock said, we don't use that anymore. So, it's a pattern. If it's a pattern, it's a pattern, and so anyway, but I survived that test, but I didn't know it was coming. It
can be a little intimidating, right?
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so some pretty cool history. So we had small talkers in the area and DDD people in the area. So it made sense to start up a meetup, and we did. And so, as they say,
and I'm really glad we did, because there's just something about having a space, an arena for people that are like-minded to connect, and it provided a way for people to present on things that they were learning, and just connect with each other and learn from each other. And I think it helps grow community, and I personally got a lot out of it. I mean, I'm sure I wouldn't be here doing what I'm doing if that hadn't have happened. So I'm grateful to you and to everyone else that was involved in that.
Yeah, those were nice times, very nice times. And so now a little bit forward from there, I wrote my book. I don't even remember exactly when I decided to write a book, but I didn't really get involved with it until near the time when we started the meetup. I just didn't have time until then, and I set aside some dedicated time to work on that. And you did some reviews kindly for me, and you even
it's mainly on the aggregates chapter, I think.
Was it? Yeah. Because so then actually, was it right after? So I know that we had the first DDD summit out in Portland, Maine, near basically at Eric's house, but not at his house. He got a library for cheap because it was a nonprofit thing, and in the Portland library. And I don't remember, though, was that early in May, or was that actually in June when we had the summit, and then we started the meetup after or before? Anyway, it was like right in that same time frame, right?
In my mind, it's all kind of muddled together. I can't even really tease apart the sequence of things.
Yeah. So anyway, there was that happening. And then at the DDD summit, some of us took on, okay, let's write some essays on certain, big items that were confusing to people. And I think that Martin Fowler, who was there, I think he wrote, but I think maybe it was in his Blicky or something like that, like his wiki, but and I don't remember, maybe it was Bounded Context or something. And I decided, okay, let me take the aggregates pattern.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And that was sort of like, okay, that actually was the...
Was that the genesis for kind of kicking things off with the book, or was the book
I started the book a few months before that, like in earnest. You always think you're going to write a book, but It's a big challenge, and unless you set aside time to actually do this, and you're just not going to finish. So I finally really had like a way to focus on that. But the aggregates essay became, I guess it's chapter 10 in the Red Book. So, I elaborated a bit on that, but so valuable to me was that you and Eric gave feedback on it. And I recall that Eric, he printed out the chapter or the essay, and he took his pen and he just circled like big areas and he says, move this to, and then maybe he put an asterisk there or something, and it would be like 3 pages down. And I would go, oh man, I really messed that up. And, and so
that's the kind of level of care and attention I would expect from him.
It's like, this is totally in the wrong place. And I, and the thing is, I remember even talking to you about it. I was like, really? Like, and then when I rearranged things the way he said, I was like, wow, he's right. Then I read it and it's like, man, that's pretty cool. So, so that was kind of that. And then, so then my essay, after all the review and everything, I wrote the essay, and Eric ended up putting it on domain language,
right?
domainlanguage.com, I think it is. And it was for the DDD community. And that got a lot of attention. And I also gave a couple talks on the essay at the DDD meetup in Denver. You videoed, I think, at least one part. I think it was a 2-part. And I think because I wrote the essay in 2 parts, I think it was. Right. I think I had, and then, so I gave 1 part, and then you, I think we didn't have the video for some reason on the first part, and then the second part, it's still up on Vimeo, I think, if I recall. So anyway, okay. Wow. I start talking about these things, and one memory brings up another memory. And so there's a lot of history there.
Well, and I think for both of us, it was kind of a formative time in terms of, you implementing DDD out was a huge step forward, I think, in terms of finally having something that we could direct people to that not only gave implementation on things, but talked through with aggregate design, for example, what are some rules of thumb for aggregate design, and provided implementations of those that people could then look at and actually do something with in a more up-to-date kind of fashion. So I think that was a critical piece. I mean, there's a lot of books on domain-driven design out now, but back then there was really Eric's and Jimmy Nielsen's, I remember, and yours. And so that was a big step forward, especially, just providing examples for people on how to do this kind of thing.
Let's get into Explore DDD. You invited me to teach a workshop and give a talk, which I did both, and it was successful. And I think it was pretty amazing. I mean, you had quite a number of, I don't remember the number of attendees. It was at least a few hundred, maybe 300. I don't know. Or maybe,
it was, for a first conference, we had a good showing for it. And it's, those first 3 years before the pandemic came, it continued to grow each year. And I was just really impressed with how, we were able to get such a great lineup of instructors for the pre-conference workshops and speakers, and everyone rallied around wanting to make it a good event, because a conference is only as good as the people that are participating in it, whether they're either contributing through speaking or whether they're attending the conference and participating in the training or the workshops or the hands-on sessions, whatever it happens to be. So it was, I joke with people, it was a little selfish in that let's run a conference in my city so that everyone comes here. But I think it's probably a good location in terms of being somewhat central for everyone in North America. And we've had people come over from Europe. We've also had people join us from Brazil and Peru and other South American countries, as well as from around the US and Canada as well. So, and a big trigger for that was seeing, I mean, for years, Skills Matter had been running the DDD Summit, the DDD Exchange. And so there was this momentum in London every year of everyone converging on that. And then they started DDD Europe. I think that was Brussels 2016. And then out of that, the thought was, okay, well, let's try doing something in North America that can kind of meet that need. And it's always felt a little bit more like bootstrapping it here in North America than something that was already established in Europe that leads to a different dynamic here, I think, in North America. But my hope is that we continue to grow it. We continue to help people connect and through the videos and everything, provide a way for people to learn more about what's going on and push each other or encourage each other to do better, greater heights.
I think there's sort of this real sort of startup kind of mentality and it's infectious, where it's just really get it out there, like ship it, break things. And there is truly that and has been that attitude for a long time in the United States, especially, I would say the Western part and Bay Area, of course, and Seattle and places like that. And so I think that there is a lot of pressure for startups to just deliver. But then what do we see, right? Like years later, we see these successful unicorns and they're like begging for help to get out of the situation that they created. But, and you explain, it's not easy, right? I mean, after they get there, somehow they think, I've had many, many opportunities to go into very large companies, unicorns and old established companies. And they somehow think that, like I'm going to teach a workshop or two and then consult for a week. And it's just going to be like, bang, it's done. Anyway, I wish we could have a greater impact on the early part of startup work or even just, transformations, modernization efforts, because, it actually is not expensive to design, right? I mean, there have been, it's more expensive maybe than not designing, but it's not like sort of like, well, let's spend the next 6 months, trying to figure out what we're going to do, and then we'll finally do something. I mean, if you're using EventStorming, for example, and other tech, tools for rapid understanding, rapid learning, it's just not that, don't have to put that much time into it. And you can actually then be experimenting with domain model code within a few days or a week, at most.
Right.
Tell me your experience with that.
Yeah, that's always been the goal, right? Is to, there was this pushback, and I think rightly so, against big design up front when you have teams that are making decisions that are hard to reverse early on in the process and on very little information, very little knowledge. And so this whole big design up front, I think, can be problematic. But it's like the pendulum has swung the other way to no design up front or very, very little. And so I like to push back against that with techniques like EventStorming and say, okay, well, you can try and optimize for big discovery up front, where you're trying to rapidly increase the amount of knowledge you have as a team, and then be able to make better decisions, be able to expose areas where the knowledge is not as good as you would like it to be, areas where maybe you need to invest because you find that that's an area that, maybe your core domain is in somewhere unexpected. And so you need to invest in that early so that you can make sure that you have more time for experiments. And instead of getting in a situation where you do all the meat and potatoes kind of functionality and then run out of time at the end to do the thing that really was justifying the development in the first place. Now, that would be an extreme example, but it's this whole idea of, can we do a small amount of event storming or some visualization technique that allows us to then quickly move to prototyping or whatever we need to do to be able to make a good design based on what we know, and then something that we can adapt over time towards what we really need. So it's not about just getting, not trying to justify it as, oh, this is a long-term investment that's only going to pay off in the long term. I think that it can pay off in the very short term in terms of getting people on the same page, or even just exposing where they're not on the same page can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah. And two, I think people imagine that domain-driven design was actually meant to be used everywhere. And that was never really the intention. And so, I try to get people to understand, look, you don't have to DDD everything. You can be sloppy and fast in some places, right? If those are maybe supporting areas, and you just got to get it done, and you can spend time correcting and cleaning up.
Good enough.
Good enough is good enough, and
lean on the frameworks, lean on the tools, whatever you need.
Right, but be careful with these really, really important ones that, as it were, your secret sauce, and give attention to those and make those, design those so that they are changeable, that they can hold up to the change, or you can build on those for new opportunities to innovate. And so, I do get involved in these transformation and modernization efforts, and I just, it's like they've got these gigantic systems, and their effort goes into like identifying, like 85 different subdomains and bounded contexts. And they say, well, it's really hard. Well, of course it's hard. How can you just look at a system and start choosing, okay, well, this is a bounded context and this, but, well, no, you have to start with a core domain and figure out what are the supporting subdomains or whatever, even generic that exists that you can lean on to do your work. Then you can understand, okay, well, let's take those things that we depend on and clean those up and extract them, or whatever it is, or, and I try to emphasize that, and the message just doesn't get across very well because they've already sort of made up their mind that they're just going to change everything, and it's impossible. I think
it is impossible. It's that, sort of boil the ocean kind of approach instead of something that, I think in a lot of situations, something that's more surgical and more focused on, like you said, the core domain, where those strategic opportunities are, and going after that first. And instead of trying to wholesale replace whatever that legacy system is or that legacy functionality is being more strategic about it and going after where it really matters. What makes it worth moving in these new directions, and how could we get there in an additive kind of way, leveraging what we already have with a view to, over time, applying something perhaps like the strangler fig pattern or something like that to be able to, if you really do need to get off the legacy system, to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, well, and here's the thing, right? Like, let's say we're putting this out there as kind of like, take our advice. We've done this, so take our advice, but show up to Explore DDD, because you're going to springboard from that, with this sort of basic knowledge. Don't start with the, boil the ocean, but, start with a core domain and learn from that what you need to depend on in the legacy. Then think about how you could clean up those areas or extract them to make them more, changeable if necessary, or at least just easier to deal with, so they're not tangled up. But now, okay, how do you actually model, right? Mm-hmm. This is why people need to talk to you, invite you in to teach and train, and consult, and and I get those opportunities too. But Explore DDD is where you can come to one place and find out what everybody's pain points are and what they've been through
Exactly.
and how they've benefited from, DDD expertise and what they've learned. And it will reinforce that it is possible, but it's not a, one-time miraculous sort of thing. It just takes hard work. And, sometimes I just tell companies, you may not actually ever completely unplug the legacy. You may not, right? You hope you can, and maybe you will, but,
those systems are there because they're so valuable, right?
Right.
And they're often cash cow systems that organizations have been relying on for a decade or two or more in some cases.
And, I was working with a bank. Well, I've worked with some different banks, but one in particular, they really wanted to get off of the mainframe and mainframe languages like COBOL, RPG, and so forth. And they, they have like 50 million lines of code running on this mainframe, plus other ancillary systems that they've purchased, things and configured them or had integrated in and all these things. And I tried to explain to them, I said, okay, look, let's take, first of all, how many lines of, the 50 million lines of code are completely obsolete? And they actually did a study on that. And they said, well, let's say that it's about 15 million. We can probably just dust 15 million lines, right? Because it's just not even doing anything anymore. And I've seen that several times in financial services companies where even up to 85% of the business rules are obsolete. And they know, can you imagine now, re-implementing 85% of a system that you didn't know was obsolete until you realize, why is our logging not getting hit? And
that
exactly.
isn't even in place anymore. Yeah,
exactly. So now, but in this case, it's not 85%. It's whatever it is, 30% or 25% or something. You don't need anymore. Great. Okay, so let's just take 35,000 lines of code. What do we get there? Let's just pretend that we could convert 100,000 lines of COBOL code or whatever it is running on the mainframe to Java, let's say, just Java. And I'm not saying one for one. People get this confused. I'm not saying translate one line for one line. I'm just saying if you could translate 100,000 lines of this legacy code to however many lines of code you would need in Java, okay, and you could eliminate 100,000 lines of legacy code per week, it would still take you more than 12 years. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so let's face the music here. You can try all you want to just make all that stuff go away. That's 40, 50 years old. Right. It's just not going away very soon.
Right. And it's not like you can then say, well, because I might hear someone say this, okay, well, we'll just put 12 teams on it at the same time.
And it'll only take 1 year.
And it'll only take 1 year. It's like, have you read the Mythical Man?
Right. Yeah. It's going to take 24 years then, right?
Exactly.
or maybe 50. So, yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Anyway. I think that's a really key point. And so really helping people understand and focus on the areas where the real opportunities are. And, a lot of what I've done over the last few years in terms of consulting has been doing, like a big picture event storming where we come in and map a value stream and where we've got a business flow that crosses over, as like multiple teams, and then trying to go from there to, okay, where are the real pain points? What are potential domain boundaries? Things like that. And then try to answer the types of questions you're describing. Where's the value in this process? How does this map to even whatever OKRs you might have in place at the moment, or whatever else you use to measure progress and set targets? So Yeah, being able to see how different things relate to each other is a key part of this.
And another thing about it, about Explore DDD and EventStorming is you can actually attend Alberto's masterclass on EventStorming, right?
Right.
There.
So I can't guarantee this, but I'm pretty sure that it's the only time he'll be teaching it in North America, at least next year. He doesn't tend to come out to the US unless I provide some kind of incentive. Or somebody does. So anyway, it's a chance for people to really learn from Alberto, and not just from the person that came up with it, but Alberto has continued to kind of innovate and push the boundaries of what you can do with EventStorming. So I think it's also an opportunity for people to see what's the state of the art in terms of EventStorming. And there'll be the opportunity to learn from him, and then I'll put a plug in for you as well. You have your 2-day pre-conference workshop happening as well that by the time I'm sure this gets published, it'll be up on the website and people can register for it. And then there'll be hands-on sessions during the conference, 2-hour labs where people can put these things into practice, and they'll be able to connect with you and Alberto and other speakers as well to really be able to pick people's brains on, how to solve some of the things that they might be tackling in their situations.
And you're teaching 2 days too, right? Your essential DDD? Yep.
Yeah. So my kind of essential DDD in terms of fundamentals. So it's really meant to take someone from not knowing anything about domain-driven design to, why do we care about domain modeling? What is EventStorming, and practice that, and then aspects of strategic design as well as refactoring code and that type of stuff. So I really try and cover all the bases for that, whether or not someone is a developer or not. So it's a lot of fun, and hopefully we'll have good attendance and be able to really get the word out about all these things.
Yeah, I want to break whatever records you had before. I want to break those. Yeah, I want to break those.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, we
break all the records.
Yeah, and and I'm just going to say, okay, the U.S., Canada, and other countries on this side of the
the Americas,
they need it badly. I have engaged with enough companies to know that they've all got the exact same situations, different domains, some same domains, but they need to be at the conference. And even if you walk away from a conference with you think like, okay, am I going to remember all this stuff? What you can remember is that other people succeed, and you're going to hear good accounts from them, which is going to give you energy to do that. And so just being in the networking situation is sometimes for I'll say even for a lot of people, even more important than the talks, I mean,
yeah.
Okay, the talks are great, of course. Eric's going to give a talk, right? Is that true? Eric's going to give a talk?
Yes. So, a couple of things about that. So, all the talks will be videoed and will be available. So that people won't miss out on seeing any talk that we might be listed. But to your point, the whole, what people might call the hallway track or the hallway conversations is really why I go to conferences, and being able to connect with the speakers. And we really have two predominant themes in March at Explore DDD. The first one, Eric will actually be doing the opening keynote on the rise of LLMs in particular, and the intersection between LLMs and, ubiquitous language and domain modeling. I mean, domain-driven design, at the heart of it is this notion of models and language. And so, how might LLMs tie into that is a lot of people are asking that. And so that'll be we'll have some content around that, both talks and hands-on sessions. And then the other part is, which, you'll be speaking to on the other keynote in the morning is really the theme around application modernization and just all the challenges that people have with that. And we have also prioritized case study talks around that. So like you mentioned, people can hear war stories of other people that have met these challenges and been able to move forward. And we're really trying to provide a broad set of content around application modernization in all the different forms that takes.
And as I understand it, nobody should fear that, there might not be enough room for them, because I think the facility that you have, the venue, can expand for you, right? Like
it scales. It
scales good.
Yeah, it's not infinitely scalable. It's not infinitely elastic, but it's embassy suites, and we have extension points in terms of if we get more people than we expect, then we'll be able to accommodate those. And we're putting a lot of effort into. It's a different venue from where we've had in the past, and it's bigger than what we've had in the past. So with a view to having more people come and providing more opportunities, we'll figure it out. And hopefully we sell out. Hopefully it's a great event and we continue to expand over time, because I think it's, I'm biased, but I think it provides a lot of value and that it's a very unique conference in terms of what's on offer. And I think when people come, they experience that. And I've heard lots of stories from people saying how much they've appreciated the sense of participation and collaboration that there is at this conference that maybe they don't see at other more commercial conferences or more tool-focused conferences. And,
to my thinking, wow, Eric's giving a talk on LLMs, for DDD. That's worth the whole conference.
In conversations with Eric, there seem to be sort of at least two different aspects of it. There's the notion of using an LLM similar to Copilot, for example, as a productivity tool. That's, in terms of coding and that type of thing. But then there's the more, I guess, exploratory aspect of this of, how could we use LLMs in domain modeling, right? Mm-hmm. How could, is it possible to ask a tool like ChatGPT, maybe not in the current version, but in future versions, to be able to somehow have it do some of the knowledge crunching for you and spit out some things, some recommendations? Who knows, right? That's the kind of area that I think we'll cover both. But I think that second area is perhaps where there's a bit of a sea change, maybe more than we've even thought about, and as a community being aware of that and seeing this as a as a groundbreaking kind of shift in the way that these tools work.
I mean, I can't wait to hear Eric's talk about that, keynotes. So it's going to be
Well, and I would encourage people. So March is a really nice time in Colorado. People can come and ski if they want around the conference, and downtown is only an hour or so from the ski resorts. So we weren't able to do that in September because the ski season was already over. But this will be a bit of an experiment to give people an opportunity to really take advantage of Colorado. So hopefully there will be enough snow for people to enjoy it, but not so much that it actually shuts down anything, because that's also a possibility in March, April.
Lots to do. Paul, man, I'm excited.
Yeah, this is good. Thank you for having me on the podcast, and you've made me look forward to March even more now in terms of there's a lot of work that has to be done to get ready for it, and we've got a really good team in place in terms of putting the conference on, and looking forward to hopefully seeing as many people as we can at the Embassy Suites in March.
Excellent. Let's break the records.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Paul, really great to talk with you again. We'll see you soon. Take care.
See you soon. Bye.